Welcome to the Sunshine Reformer podcast. My name is Gabriel, or Gabe, and this is Greg. Say hi, Greg.
How's it going?
Um, we'll be talking about some things today in regards to leftism and gun culture in the United States. On the politics side, I've got a couple things in regards to the Holocaust and how it relates to the United States in the 21st century. And that's politics side. And then Greg, you got a couple topics for us? Would you just give
I
us like
do.
a little sentence, kind of like brief slapperoni, what you got going on?
To the best of my ability, my friend. uh, cheers, by the way. We're both
Cheers.
drinking a little bit. It makes it easier to talk,
Mm-hmm.
at least in my opinion. Um, so, yes, my name is Greg. I'm going to be covering the firearms side of things, but also we're both going to contribute to the best of our ability to each side of the podcast, whatever. So I'm going to talk about the current gun or firearm climate, culture, whatever you want to call it. Um, right now, today is September 21st, 2020. So we're, you know, well through the year. We're making our way through this crazy year. Um, but currently, there have been some crazy things along with the crazy political climate that we're in, which very nicely relates to firearms, uh, both on the right and the left side of the spectrum, but specifically on the left, more and more left-leaning, liberal, whatever you want to call yourself, people are purchasing firearms, which is generally, or I should say stereotypically, not a thing. And it's kind of interesting, and obviously for people like you and me, uh, is a great it's a great thing. We're both very avid believers in armed self defense, and so I'm going to talk about a little bit about that. Um, gun news. There's just been a couple of things that have happened in the last couple of days that I want to talk about, and then if we have time, I'm going to go over. I have my carry gun to my right, and I was going to talk about that and just a little bit of intro into buying your first firearm if we have time. But that's not the main topic. So, yeah,
All right.
there it is.
Nice little taste. Hope everybody stays. Get
Mm-hmm.
that watch time up.
Exactly.
um, so I guess let's jump into it. So the
Yes.
Holocaust. How does the Holocaust relate to the United States today in the 21st century? This happened. This specific event happened well over 50 years ago. Just to kind of put it in perspective, it's 2020. This was happening in the 1940s. So there's quite a jump there in time, and a lot has happened between that
It
time.
seems like a long time ago, but really it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, and that's another thing. We were viewing that length of time. Why it was so long ago is because there's like generations that exist currently today in between
Yeah.
that time, and that kind of makes it seem like it's a long time ago. But it's like looking back at, if you put things into perspective, that like we're in the what is it called, after current era, ACE, as historians put it, or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, we're 2,000 years into that era. And even prior to that, there's 4,000 years of recorded human civilization, and even before that, there was like unrecorded and undocumented like civilizations that existed for that. So like, in retrospect, this is a pretty short period of time we're talking about. But if we look at this, there were the greatest generation who participated in fighting in World War II. And
The
then after,
original Antifa, if you will.
the original Antifa, and depending on what side of leftism you fall on, there's arguments for and against feeling that way. But they
I'm
went out to
just
fight
yeah,
Nazis. They went out to fight Nazis and
right.
and Mussolini at the time.
Right.
More so Nazis, of course. And then immediately after, you get the baby boomers, and then after that, you get Gen X, and then Gen Y or millennials, and then you get Gen Z, and then there's a couple more generations or something like that. After
I
that, I
wonder
don't.
what they'll be calling it, 50 years from now.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the generation names are. But back to
Yeah.
this, um, how does that relate? How do these intergenerational things relate? Well,
To what
based
we're seeing today is what you're saying, right?
yeah, how does that relate to today? What do we see today that relates
Yeah.
to this generational difference that we're talking about? Well, according to a Pew Research study that was done earlier this year, January 22nd of 2020 was published this year, Pew Research. And I'll go ahead and switch displays here real quick too. Um, so I know, Greg, sorry, you can't see this exactly right now, but
That's okay.
I can link you the article if you wanted to look at it.
No
Um,
worries.
but it's titled "What Americans Know About the Holocaust." So basically, Pew Research, if you don't know, is probably one of the largest independent surveyors or researchers. I would probably argue in the world, if not in the United States. It's independent as far as I am aware. Could be wrong, but I've never I've never heard of them getting funding from like, multiple different entities or multiple governments, whatever. It tends to be a highly cited reference for uh, uh, just a slew of different types of work, from scholastic to journalistic. Um, they polled people, and they break it down by demographics, so age, race, sex, all those, gender, etc. And they'll try to pick the demographics that stand out, the demographics that make the most sense to actually like report on, like what differences stick out the most.
Hmm.
Well, we'll start broadly. Um, the question asked, and I'll provide this link in the description and such, but the question asked is, in your own words, what does the term Holocaust refer to? Fortunately, 84% of the U.S. adults polled mentioned the death, persecution of Jews or related topics, and they provide an asterisk in the different categories that were included there, which is good. But as we start to look into the information, it starts to not be so good. So, like, how the next question, one of the questions would be, how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust? It's a very specific number, but generally is rounded up to 6 million, approximately 6 million Jews. Only 45% of Americans polled answered that correctly. The rest,
I, I
the
I knew that,
the rest were
by the way.
wrong. Some by a little. So 12% answered 3 million, which a little
Hmm.
in this case, that's half.
Did you
Some
know? Did you know the answer to that?
I did.
Yeah.
But I also like spent like 2 years into like in like Nazi debate forums, like debating people. So like,
Right.
um, that was
I
that's
was telling you in the last episode that I grew up in a I wouldn't say it was a majority Jewish community, but it was a very large Jewish community.
yeah.
So, but yeah, go on.
To like not know this, that would have been pretty, I guess, not
I
kosher.
would, yeah, I would have felt weird if I didn't know that. But go ahead.
um, 12% also answered more than 12 million.
Hmm.
They don't give a specific thing there. The surprising one is 29% were not sure or didn't answer. So of course we don't know how many were just like didn't answer. Um, but to see the not sure, no answer at 29%, at nearly a third of the people polled, just had no idea the number or even could guess the number or whatever the case was.
Right.
That's like kind of, I would say that's probably indicative of like how this is going to end up going. Um, one of the next questions is, how did Hitler become Chancellor of Germany? And I actually had a debate with one of my friends recently about something similar to this in regards to like the electoral college and stuff. But 43%, again, less than half of adults polled, um, knew it was by democratic means. Hitler was elected democratically. We can go into specifics and argue whether it was like a good democratic process whether or not it was skewed in any way, kind of like how like what we do to like minority groups in the United States today, where we may close polling stations in those areas and make it more difficult for them to vote. We can argue that all day, but the fact of the matter is he was still elected
Mhm.
democratically.
I didn't know that. I got to be honest.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a coup. He didn't like just like
Right.
go up and like throw the chancellor and was like, that's it.
Right.
Hail
It's me
me.
now.
Like he
Yeah.
didn't do that. He was elected. He was a populist.
Right.
And I tend to say the same thing about this. Populism can go both ways. It's a swinging door. It revolves 360. You can go left or you can go right. Populism tends to like work off the emotion of people rather than the actual like policy positions of individuals. It's kind
Sure.
of why we saw the popularity with Bernie Sanders and Trump in 2016 and again in 2020, because Trump's a populist. And while Bernie does have better policy positions and he does talk about policy positions a lot, there's a large portion of the base that just don't care about policy positions and they just want to see someone like super left. And that's
Right.
populism working. It's working off the emotion that individuals have to what we could like arguably say is like a strong man, someone who's going to lift us up out of,
Sure.
XYZ. But he was elected. And then more than 50%, so 53%, I'm adding these together. 25% was by violently overthrowing German government, and 28% said no, not sure, no answer. So 53% got super wrong or didn't answer, and then the other two was hereditary secession and by agreements with nearby countries. So basically, like a legal coup
So
kind
they
of
gave
thing.
them all wrong answers.
And pardon?
Was one of the answers right though? Like it was
So like
Democratic.
they kind of leave it open ended, and they'll
Hmm.
so like they'll ask the question and then you kind of like write your answer, and then they will put them into like the closest categories that they can get,
Okay.
and that's
Got
how
it.
they like. I would have never put by hereditary secession as an answer, and the reason why they do that is because they don't want to influence your answer by making it multi-choice. They want to
Right.
get what you think. They don't want to get
Right.
like, well, by deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning, the answer is probably B. They don't want to get that. They want to get what you're thinking. And then, uh, what were Nazi created ghettos? This was okay. This is pretty good, I guess. Parts of town where Jews were forced to live. Um, 63% answered correctly, so that's good. That was the correct answer. Again, 26% not sure or no answer. We see
Hmm.
this consistent number. Nearly a third of people have no answer or they're just not sure,
Right.
which is still it's concerning. This is 33% of polled United like American citizens or American people. Um, and then when did the Holocaust happen? So what was the time frame? The correct answer: 1930 to 1950. 69% overwhelmingly yes. Still, 18% not sure, no answer. So like we consistently see this 20 to 30% or near 30%, just absolutely no clue. And then in some cases where it's detrimentally so, like almost 50%, like in the first question, just completely get something wrong, um, like, or also the 25% violently overthrowing German government. Um, and this kind of speaks to our education system,
Hmm.
and how the education system forms the opinions of what will become adults. And this is kind of something that's more vaguely stated as children are the adults of tomorrow, or children are our future. It's kind of like almost, it's not double speak, but it's like a thought. What is it called? A thought stopping sentence or something like that, where basically it's just a saying to get you to stop thinking about what that actually means.
Right.
Because what that actually means is that consistently, somewhere between 20 and 30% of adults who went through education systems have no idea about any of this stuff. A
Right.
third, a third. And if we
Yeah.
look at like the voting population of this country is somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on if you like go to active or if you go to like who actually votes, something like that.
Even that
That
number is
translates.
terrifying.
That,
Only
yeah.
60% of Americans vote.
Hey guys, democracy only works if you participate. You know, it's
Yeah,
kind of a meme. I know Australia, you're required to vote because it's you'll get fined or something, or it's against the law. They have, but but they'll have people that actually represent like the people's interest, whereas opposed to like otherwise, you know, you get somewhere between 20 to 30% of the country controlling like the outcome of elections, is what we saw in Trump. If everybody
right,
voted, if everybody who was able to be registered to vote was registered to vote and voted, we probably wouldn't be looking at Trump today. You know, as
right,
much as I didn't like Hillary Clinton's not like an outright fascist against her own people.
right,
Um, uh, but that's like a whole other topic. Well,
right.
kind of, because this still goes into fascism. So a big hallmark of fascism is redefining education and redefining educational values and how we define historical narratives, because that's how we teach. We teach in narratives. People like to listen to stories. People like to, you know, sit around a campfire and like listen to like, you know, ABC, you know, beginning, climactic, and then conclusion kind of thing.
Right.
It's the easiest way to educate. It's the easiest way to instruct. We retain it better. There are even studies going to like oral traditions tend to be incredibly accurate because the tools used in oral traditions to pass information down are refined to a point that it's easy to remember the information being conveyed. Um, and this is important because Trump announces Patriotic Education Commission, a largely political move, you know, according to NPR. And we can argue this is largely political. There was a project by the New York Times put out relatively recently, like past few years or so, called the 1619 Project, which was basically redefining and restructuring historical education to include slavery to a stronger degree, to kind of educate the American population on like what actually happened in this country. You know, the Trail of Tears is definitionally genocide by today's standards. People were Native American people were put on a forced march for hundreds of miles, without food, without water. In some instances, many of them died. They were forced out of their home, like land area location. But it
Hmm.
was done like in the 1800s. So at the time, they wouldn't have called it genocide. Genocide didn't become a term until much later. Um, by today's standards, by today's definitions, and by today's words, we would have called that a genocide. Um, the African American people who currently reside in the country, who were brought here by means of slavery, um, that's that's genocide too. Their culture was destroyed. Like modern, what we have today in African American societies would be completely different if these people had left their homes voluntarily, because their traditions, their culture, their religion, their education, all of this stuff would have been able to have been translated through generations. And although yes, these things do change over time by each generation,
Hmm.
um, it would have been able to, you know, loosely I use the term naturally, it would have been able to naturally progress. It would have been naturally able to evolve into its own thing, as opposed to the African American community today, largely and broadly speaking. Admittedly, I can't speak for anecdotal experiences or individuals, of course, but broadly speaking, it's a combination of it's a lot of borrowing, and it's not necessarily the case that uh, they want to borrow. In some cases, that may be the case, but it's mostly a product of needing to borrow. And uh, well, again, it could be argued that African American culture is just a like an extension of like what it was for slavery. You know, we got the like African American churches tend to be known for like the choirs and stuff. That kind of came out of slavery, from the singing in the fields and such, to
Right.
pass the time, also try to forget about the fact that they're enslaved, and a lot of other things. And a lot of like modern culture is derived from that. We got jazz, we got hip hop, we got R&B, we got rap,
Hmm.
we got rock and roll. We got a lot of culture out of it, but the cost was an entire race of people was was undermined for the sake of profits at the end of the day.
Right.
Their rights, their education, their livelihoods, their culture, um, it's all gone. And to to say that the culture that they can pull from, the history they can pull from, is that of forced servitude, isn't really comparable to like what we would consider like traditional, I suppose, um, like what would traditionally like come from like just a natural progression of culture
Hmm.
or natural change of culture. It was forced, and this quote, this rewriting of history, um, in arguably an inaccurate fashion, uh, is disgusting. Uh, like,
I don't really. I heard about that happening, but I don't know the details of what he was proposing.
so loosely, Trump talks about patriotic education. Uh, Broad term, no real definition. What is patriotic education? What is
Right.
that supposed to mean?
Is that just learning about the Fourth of July? Like,
That exactly, like what is patriotic education? What the hell is that supposed to mean? What is it tied to? How does it like? To
I just
me, that
wanted to
sounds like
enter.
a. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you: are you familiar with? So I just learned about this. This is relating to what you're saying as far as education. So I grew up in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
which is in the north,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, I feel like I got a pretty good. I went to public school my whole life. My wife went to private school, only for high school, but she says that it was a lot different than public school. But anyways, so when I was in school, I learned about the Civil War, and I learned that there was the Confederate States and there was the Union States, and there's obviously this big controversy over the Confederate flag and um, whether or not the Civil War was about slavery or not. Um, Famously, you know, I know a big point of contention. Well, I guess let me get to the point of what I was really getting at which was what uh, this there's a organization called the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Oh no.
Yes, I think that's the name of them, something
Yes,
like
that's
that.
correct. That's correct.
Okay, and this organization that started just after the Civil War literally lobbied and like made, like you were just saying, they I don't think they were trying to do so within the context of a fascist government, but they were absolutely trying to change the way that, at least in the South, that the way that history was being taught with regard to the Civil War.
Yes.
Because I have spoken with a few people. I'm not sure if this is true for you and where you grew up, because I know you grew up in Florida. But I've spoken to a few other friends of mine who did grow up in the South, and it was basically let's just say that they left out some stuff uh,
Oh yeah. It's
in
it's bad.
in the
It's
narrative.
horrible. It's horrible.
And I just recently learned about this, and I was like, so they literally just don't teach you guys in the South, school children, like the full story,
No,
like
they
I
no, they
did
skip out on that.
in the North. And that just completely blew my mind. And like you were saying before, had these people just received a regular education on what actually happened, there might not be such a big divide going on with regard to the Confederate flag and the Confederate statues and stuff, all this kind of stuff that's going on that's controversial, etc. Um, that might not be such a big uh, deal if the education system was
Well,
was
that goes
correct.
back. So what you're talking about, it's got a name. It's called the Lost Cause myth.
Hmm.
And this is probably one of the, I would argue it's probably one of the most talked about topics, probably when we're talking about United States history,
Yeah.
because because this goes back to like the 1920s. One of our presidents was involved in spreading this and was probably
Yes.
the single,
It went it went all the way up to the national
this
government.
is
That's
one
what
of
I'm
the
saying.
single-handed like perpetrators of this, of the lost cause myth.
Hmm.
This is probably like a whole nother topic, but it does kind of relate. This goes back literally 100 years ago, um,
Right.
almost like to the T. Um, it's just it's so concerning. And there's a couple websites I think I'm going to provide linking in here, like this very detailed website from Britannica.com, or this definition from Britannica.com, going over the very specifics of how we define fascism, uh, what goes into fascism. And I think understanding this, because it's so in depth and it's so um, it goes into such detail. Um, there's just so much information on this, and then it goes into examples afterwards. I'll provide this, but the redefining and specifically the mythologizing of national history, or what is to be considered national history, that was a big deal in Germany.
Hmm.
That's one of the biggest examples of like Germany's
Like do it for the
growth into
motherland kind
fascist.
of
Yeah,
thing.
the fatherland for them, the motherland for Russia.
Fatherland.
Uh,
That's yeah, 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 yeah.
that's the dying for your nation, like just for the sake of dying for your nation, not going beyond that. Talking about like your amazing like god tier, like heaven on earth, history, like the German people were like these ubermensch,
Right.
like just epic
The
people,
Aryan
like
Nation kind
yeah
of thing.
just that, like idolization, hyper fixation, hyper mythologizing. um it's just some of the words. Whether Trump intends to do this or not doesn't make it not fascistic, or is fascistic. The fact that he does it at all makes it fascistic. Like,
Right.
he could do this without the intent of being a fascist. It doesn't make him less of a fascist.
Right.
Pro-American curriculum, you know, as we said earlier, patriotic education. He also stated it was a twisted web of lies. Like, this is
The
defining
current the current
the
the
current
current way we're
the
doing things.
current president, talking about the
No, no, no.
1619
The current
project.
education system is a twisted web of lies.
Oh
Is that
yeah,
what he's saying?
current education, the 1619 project, which was going out of its way to try to correct our current view of history, and teaching people how to do this. He goes on to saying, teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse, the
Hmm.
truest sense. For many years now, the radicals have mistaken Americans' silence for weakness. They're wrong. There is no more powerful force than a parent's love for their children, and patriotic moms and dads are going to demand that their children are no longer fed hateful lies about this country. Just like those two sentences alone is just sickening to think about, that
Hmm.
we are considering. And this goes like, we're already, again, Americans are doing this constantly, committing genocide again in ICE camps, with this a whole nother topic, with the spraying of chemicals that cause permanent damage to the body, eyes, skin tissues, and lung tissue, permanent damage being sprayed in ice. And just the defying of international agreements that we have with the UN when it comes to just
Hmm.
the immigration process in general, um, the forced hysterectomies. And it's like all of this leads into that. It's like, if you ever
Right.
take a course in college about feminism, they'll talk about intersectional feminism. All of these things are related. They can
Right.
be looked at individually, but there's more to be gained by looking at them when they come to their intersection, which is why it's called intersectional feminism. Um, we can see that X, Y, and Z do have its own issues, but if we look at X, Y, and Z as being a single point or accumulating to that single point, there's a more defined problem that we can address. And this is going to go back to, again, education. Having actual education, going back and like looking at the actual history, and not talking about Thomas Jefferson as being like this amazing god tier, forefather who did amazing things. While that is the case, he did do great things. He also had a really sketchy relationship that historians are still trying to figure out today with one of his slaves, and the possible chance that he was a child molester. Um, Something that probably wasn't talked about in any educational system. you know
Well, I was just watching a brief. There's a couple of YouTube channels that I follow that are actually good. They're educational and etc.
mm-hmm.
But just learning about George Washington, he historically he's known as this humble leader. Made all of these great
The wooden
military.
teeth.
Yeah, well, that was just
Well, those were
because
slaves' teeth. They lied about that. Those are the teeth of slaves.
what's going on? He had slave teeth.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
just thought I thought the wooden teeth thing was like just the way it was back then.
Poor people would have like other alternatives. Obviously, if you didn't have slaves, it would be hard to
Right.
get slave teeth.
Yeah. Well, I knew he was a slave owner, so that's kind of what I was getting at. Is that he's kind of touted as this great military general, made all these great defensive moves, and the crossing of the Delaware and all that kind of stuff. He did do all that, and that's great. But he also made a lot of mistakes, militarily speaking. And of course, he was a slave owner, and all of the founding fathers were. And so that sort of in and of itself, to me, obviously I'm a few centuries too late as far as doing anything about it, and I'm just sort of living in the time that I am. But that just to me says that the country wasn't necessarily founded on this great manifest destiny story that likes to be,
Yep.
like you were saying, like it's
Mythologized.
Yeah,
It's
mythologized.
like
Yeah.
brought up to like this like god tier level of just it's
Yeah.
supposed to be awesome. It's supposed to get you hyped, and you're supposed to make you feel great about your country, and that's the point of it. It's to get you nationalistic. It's to
Yeah.
get you to the point that we were talking earlier. I'll die for my country, not because of anything else, but for the sake of my country. It's you put your country so high above yourself as an individual that it
Yeah.
becomes greater than who you are actually as that individual, and it's just to a mass scale. There's like 400 500 million people in the United States, estimated, or what have you. That's a lot of people if they were to follow the same path. Obviously not everybody does. Some people though just like don't care. They don't have it in their line of sight. Maybe they just don't know. Those people will also get caught up into it.
Right.
Whether they do directly or indirectly, will end up getting caught into it. And it's sad because
Yeah.
they just don't know.
Well,
Um,
let's.
let's transition because this is dark.
Well, I was going to say, Trump has introduced this, but we'll see what happens in November as far as anything like that being implemented. I don't
Yeah.
think, a lot of people think that the president actually has a lot of power. I think, has a lot of more. He has more influential power than actual
Yeah.
legislative power.
Like another thing
Which-
about this is that
which is
the
good.
states have the right to do their education. It can't be
Right,
induced
yeah.
federally. So
Yeah.
that's another issue, and I think the article brings it up. and talks about how, like, it's not even likely this is going to happen. But the fact that we're even talking about this, the fact that this is even an
Exactly.
article that needs to be reported on,
Yeah.
is that's the concern, because he's not the only one. And we go back to, you were just saying, he has influence. There
Yeah.
are governors who, you will do just about anything to get,
DeSantis.
yeah, DeSantis, Rick Scott.
Yeah.
They'll do just about anything to get Trump's approval, because it's a nice little,
It's a political career at the end of the
electorally,
day.
it's a smart move. Like, I
Yeah.
can't, like, you would, if you're a Democrat, you'd want to appeal to Obama, just like Biden does really hard, especially in the early parts where Obama didn't even endorse Biden, but Biden kept
Right.
playing up the, hey, I got a black friend card, and like, it's a smart political move, because he was a popular president, undeniably so. Um, it's just to garner votes at the end of the
Yeah.
day. But some of these things could have like actual impact, and some of these might trickle down to like actual state governments. So
Right.
that's why I wanted to bring it up. That's why I wanted to kind of talk about it, was to kind of just, get it out there and make sure that it was, people were aware that this could happen.
Yeah.
This could
It's
happen here.
certainly a skewed way of looking at things.
In some ways, this kind of already did happen. We were talking again about the
Yeah, the
uh,
Daughters of the Confederacy.
Daughters of the
That did happen.
Confederacy,
That was a real thing.
and the Lost Cause myth. In some respects, it's already happened, and it's just a matter of them being able to build upon that, to expand it to more people.
Yeah.
So,
Wild stuff.
I'm kind of, that's enough depression for me today.
Exactly.
Let's
We can
talk about
we can
something
move
fun.
on to guns if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's move on to guns.
Okay.
Real quick, do you mind if I just keep the FPCA website up while you're talking about this?
Yes, that's the
You do mind, or
firearms
would you like me
policy.
to pop that up?
Sorry, no, I don't mind.
Okay. Sorry, I just
Put
want to
it
double
up.
check. Just want to double check.
You're fine. It doesn't have to be that formal. So yeah, the website that is currently being shown is the Firearms Policy Coalition, which is, I don't know if they're the largest organization doing what they're doing, but they're probably one of the largest. And what they're, I'll go ahead and pull up on my end because I can't see
Yeah.
what you're seeing. Why is this not working?
While I was doing that, they got a few different things. So this first one we're looking at is the Take Action, and they got different bills that do very specific things. They talk about their position and stuff as well. They also have the links to these things and how you can take action.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they're nonprofit. Yeah, they're nonprofit. They are nonpartisan, which is
big deal.
Really important in this, especially with this topic. And if you just click over right in the middle there, it says news.
Nice.
And this is kind of what I was going to draw off of, just some of these news stories. But before I do that, I wanted to talk about a little, just off the top of my head, just the current climate we're living in right now, and just kind of take everybody up to speed as far as what the current situation is with guns and gun sales, panic buying, ammunition, all that kind of stuff is kind of going on right now. So as we entered 2020, which of course is an election year, I've only owned firearms for about 2 years. Gabriel, I'm not sure how long you have been a gun owner for.
Since 1819, so like five-ish years, 4-ish years, something like that.
Okay.
But not as active as you, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I'm just wondering because, so I guess, in my research and what I've heard from other people, in an election, in pretty much every election year, not dependent on who is in office, it doesn't really matter. Even this goes back as far as the Bill Clinton era, which actually did have, that's when the assault weapons ban was made. But so, anyways, every election year there is some kind of panic buying situation, whether it be firearms or ammunition or whatever. Um, but typically in those election years of the past, it's been primarily right leaning conservative people making all of these purchases because typically the Democrats, um, somewhere, usually in there, somewhere in their agenda, they have something that's anti gun, whether that be a ban of some kind, usually on the heels of some kind of mass shooting event or whatever. Um, that's usually been the case. Well, this year is obviously way different and more extreme. Uh, I've gone back and forth with my dad, who is a conservative person, um, on um, basically how left leaning people and the quote unquote liberal community has been purchasing firearms um, really at a historic rate. People in general, and I'm sure there's obviously conservative people that are buying guns too. But the point is this year is the first year that left leaning people have been buying firearms almost as much as the right side conservatives, if you will, which is really historic. Because, like I said, for the last, I would say probably at least 20 years, if not longer, um, the Democratic agenda has been very anti firearm. And so I think it's pretty important to talk about that because, um, you know, you go to the reasons why people are buying firearms, and again, it's defense. There's minorities. So Gabriel and I were talking about the minorities. There's religious minorities, there's racial minorities and cultural minorities. Speaking to typically the African American and Latino communities. Um, there's the LGBTQ community, which a lot of people don't think of them as a minority, sort of disenfranchised community, but they absolutely are. Like you were saying, that the trans community is one of the most targeted um, communities for violence in the country. So So this is just what's going on right now, and it's pretty insane. Just ammunition right now is really hard to come by. Guns in general are really hard to come by. Either they're hard to come by, or they're just have become really expensive. Like a lot of shops have just tacked on a lot of extra money. And that's just economics, supply and demand or whatever. But more so than that, I think it's just more important than now more than ever to consider arming yourself for self-defense. And whether or not you believe or you know I don't want to get too political. I feel like politics is your thing, but
It's
whether or
okay.
not you want to
Everyone's
get
allowed to be into politics.
I know whether or not you agree with the protesting that's going on right now, and however you fall on that, whether or not you believe in open carry protesting and all that kind of thing. I personally, as far as what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse and all that kind of stuff, um, he committed a felony by having a firearm underage and also crossing state lines. Those are two felonies right there. So, but the point being, however you want to define self defense, um, it's not a bad idea to have something to defend yourself. And that's kind of the point of what I
I
was
would
saying.
also add, just make sure you thoroughly understand how self-defense works in your state if you're not listening in the state of Florida, or even in
Yeah.
also the state of Florida, like anywhere that you live. Because some
Right.
places have like what is it? They have stand your ground. Some places have what is it? Protect your castle doctrine.
Castle
Or
doctrine. Yeah.
castle. Um, and all these things have different implications. They mean different things. They require different things from you who are protecting yourself. In most cases, broadly speaking, and again, double check.
Hmm.
As long
Yeah, I
as
can only speak to Florida, but
as long
yeah.
as you legally, as long as you feel like your life is in threat, um, and you know that you can prove that in the court of law, usually that's considered you're gonna be just fine. Some
Right.
other things to keep in mind is like if they're running away, if they're disengaging you, don't shoot them. They're not in that case you can't really argue so much or so well that your life was in threat because the shots came through the back and they were running away
Unless
from
you're a
you.
police officer.
Oof. Yeah, unless you're a police officer. But
Yeah.
if you shot them in the back while they were running away, that might not look so good, and that may
Yeah.
end up serving you jail time. So just be very familiar with your local laws, with your state laws in regards to self-defense, and what you need to do to be prepared for that. Because it's not just about like protecting yourself or your life, liberty, or property or whatever. Um, there's a court case that typically comes afterwards that people tend to not talk about,
Oh
and
yeah.
you need to be mindful of that when you do that.
Yeah. So there's a how am I going to put this? There's a school of thought. We'll just put it that way. That is sort of been circulating in self defense forums that I've been looking into, and it's something that I typically it's something I definitely plan on teaching my students once I become a concealed carry um, instructor. But the school of thought is um, so. Let me give you some context. So for the bulk of the last 2 decades, what's been going on in the world? There's lots of law enforcement. There's been an increased hiring of law enforcement. There's been increased soldiers, military veterans that have been getting out of the military, some of them becoming police officers, some of them retiring to do other things. But the point is, a lot of these people are becoming firearms instructors. Okay. And the problem with a former police officer, a former soldier, specifically a soldier that might have been, infantry or an MP or whatever, some kind of combat based MOS. These people are teaching self defense or concealed carry um, courses, which is contributing to the militarization or the mindset that you know the goal of a soldier is to go into danger, and the same thing with a police officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the goal of a civilian, an armed civilian. You kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah, like your job. If
You
you're
are
fearing for your life, you should be doing everything that you can do to preserve your life. Engagement should be the last thing that you do.
include right, including running away.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point. Is I think that there's a big problem with the way that a lot of these instructors are teaching their classes, because they're saying, you know what, if you are okay, scenario, you and your wife and your kid are at Walmart, and I know there was a Walmart shooting in El Paso not that long ago. So let's just say you're in the parking lot and you are concealed carry, and you look to your left and you see a person with a gun walking towards the building. What do you do? And I'm asking you, Gabriel, what would you do?
You gotta get the kid. You gotta get the family safe. You gotta get yourself and this family safe. So if you can possibly, maybe hide behind a car, duck for cover, hide yourselves, get out of line of sight. Hopefully they don't see you. Maybe you see them before they see you. That would be optimal.
Right.
Get out of the way. Um, and I'd probably unholster if I was carrying. I'd probably unholster, but I wouldn't engage.
Okay. So what you're describing to me is that you wouldn't be a hero.
No,
right?
no. I
You're not going to chase that guy. You're not going to engage that guy if they don't see you and are actively engaging you.
it's not my job. I've got my own family in that case.
Right.
Maybe we call 911 in that circumstance. I would still have my gun unholstered because there's a guy, out actively shooting.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I never know when he's going to turn that corner or not. But the
Right.
goal would be
And
to
I forgot to say, let's say he's, 30 yards away from you or 20 yards away from you, which is 60 feet.
still
That's far
hoping
enough.
still hoping I saw him before he saw me, kind of
Right.
thing.
That's
But
far enough away where you can effectively get yourself to some cover or do something where you don't have to start shooting into a parking lot with other people around. And so that's my whole point is that civilians are not meant to be heroes. You're not, you are defending your life. And I don't think it's up to anybody, a stranger or whatever, to defend my life as well. My kind of mantra, the way that I go about self defense, and I carry a firearm every day with me wherever I go. If I find myself in a situation where there is somebody that has a firearm within, I say about 30 feet of me, maybe 20, whatever you want to call a comfortable space. If you're that close to me and you have a firearm out, I'll probably at that point have to make a decision based on all the factors that's going on around me. But if I have any opportunity to run in the other direction or drive in the other direction or whatever it is, I'm not trying to be a hero. And I just, you talk about all these other issues in the world, toxic masculinity and toxic information and all that kind of stuff. I think personally, this is an area of the firearms training world that I think needs to be talked about more, because that's how you end up with those two lovely people in St. Louis where they walked out in front of their
yeah,
front lawn and they both just had guns out,
yeah.
just whatever,
No,
no big
no
deal.
trigger discipline, by the way. No,
No,
no being
yeah,
mindful of like where the barrel is
nobody was
being
coming up to their
pointed. Like, geez,
yeah, nobody was coming up to their property. Nobody was engaging with them. The protesters themselves didn't have firearms.
yeah.
So why are you out in front of your front yard with your AR-15
If
and
anything,
your
it was
wife
a
with?
threat, and that's illegal.
Yeah,
You
right.
can't threaten
Yeah, they
people's
were the
lives.
threat.
So,
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that I want to get. I wanted to make that point because um, just a lot of the training that's available out there is just not civilian based. It's all of these former military and former police officers who have their set of training, which is not the same kind of training that you need as an armed civilian. And so that's the kind of takeaway I wanted to say there. Just because a lot of people, I just know it's something that not a lot of people talk about, and
no, it's a breath of fresh air because
yeah, it's just
that's
it's a topic that not is not addressed. I don't think as much as it should be.
and another thing. If you just because you have a CCL or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that you're trained to the standard that you should probably feel comfortable carrying. Like just because you have a CCL, like you could get a
Right.
CCL and have like no prior training, if you get like lucky, or whatever, which isn't really hard to
Well,
do.
you have to you do have to take a course, but in my opinion, at least in Florida, I don't know about other states. I can't speak to other states, but in Florida, the standard for um, the test and like your demonstration of knowledge is very very small.
Yeah. So
It's
like,
not good at all.
you could get lucky, get your CCL, and have
Yeah, anybody
no
could
real
take the
prior
class and
training, and
yeah,
all of a sudden you can just carry like a weapon, and it's or you can conceal carry a weapon, and it's just like I've taken it. Um, I still would rather. I think I want to practice a little bit more though before I start carrying though, because it's
yeah,
I don't feel like I'm good enough that if I was in a situation, whether it be like 5 yards away or whether it be like 30 yards away or something like that,
Hmm.
I don't feel like I'm comfortable enough in that situation to just, draw and be able to protect myself.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
that's, you know,
that's part of the
so,
responsibility too, is like, cause that goes back to the rules of using a firearm, is like knowing, knowing what you're shooting at, knowing what's behind your target, and all that kind of stuff comes into play too. Are you in a crowded street? Are they facing a brick wall? Like, that's probably going
right.
to change when you shoot. How close are they? How far are they? You know,
Yeah.
what?
And that's I've actually gotten into a couple heated debates with some people, even in the left leaning community. So a lot of people in the leftist community, left leaning community, whatever, are either just working class people or lower income or whatever. Um, I know that there are quote unquote budget firearms out there, both rifles and handguns. Um, but typically speaking, firearms ownership is not cheap. It costs money for the gun, costs money for ammunition, and it costs money for training. Uh, now there is training out there available, and again, we're have we did mention that we're in Central Florida, right? That we're broadcasting.
I don't think we have officially, but
I don't know if we officially said it or not.
we're like central off Florida. I think we've said where
Yeah,
we are, but
I'm in Orlando, and
I'm
you're
in
in
Palatka.
Palatka, which is adjacent to St. Augustine. Um, and so I can only speak to Florida as far as the training standard, but again, it's not very high. Most people, I would say, could pass a concealed carry test, so to speak. And that's the other thing too, is there's no real standard. Um, you go to one concealed carry class versus another, just pick two randomly, and they could be two, completely different things. Some people make you shoot a lot at the range, provide guns and ammo and all that kind of stuff if you get a really good one. Some of them don't even require you to have a firearm. I know you have to shoot a firearm at some point. Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't
You
actually
do,
have
you
to
do.
go. I didn't actually have to go through it because of my military background. Um, but even that, in and of itself, is kind of scary to me because I know, being in the military, not everybody in the military should have a firearm. I don't think so.
Well, don't they expedite it too? Um,
Uh, yes, but I got mine right after the government shutdown situation,
oh, okay.
whatever that was
So
last year.
that wasn't really expedited, I bet.
No, it was supposed to be, but I still
Man, you didn't
waited.
even get the benefit of it.
Yeah, I still waited about 60 or 70 days, whatever it was.
10 years, and you still
Um,
gotta wait 3 months.
exactly. Um, so that's what I've talked about with people is that I believe if this was President Greg's gun policy, I would absolutely instill a national training standard for concealed carry because I don't believe that infringes upon your rights to own a firearm. I just think that if you're going to own a firearm, you should probably get some training.
Hmm.
The argument being, um, if you send the military overseas, imagine sending them overseas without any training. Do you think we would win all these wars and you know whatever
Sometimes
be
win.
successful? Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes win. Sometimes we don't win.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you wouldn't send an untrained soldier
the
overseas
engagements would
to,
be at an incredible loss.
yeah.
It would just
So
be
I think
terrible.
training is important. I don't see it as an infringement. I don't see it as an infringement on the this is the argument I always get. The single mother who has an abusive ex husband who wants to defend herself and doesn't have any money. Why would you deny her rights to owning a firearm and defending herself? Well, I'm
Well,
not denying her
listen,
rights. I want her to be trained and I want her
you
to know
can
what she's
open
doing.
carry in your own home. like,
Right. What you do in
like,
your house is fine. Like, I don't
yeah.
care. But as soon as you bring that gun outside the home and into my world, I would prefer that you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
When you get there. So that's kind of my position on it. There are people that disagree with me and say that it's called like the constitutionalists and people. That's my concealed carry permit is the Constitution, and to me that's extreme or whatever.
Well, the
But
Constitution doesn't mention really anything about concealed carry specifically.
no, it doesn't. No,
It's
I know.
incredibly broad.
Yeah.
Same thing
So
with like the
it does
militia thing. It's incredibly broadly stated. So
it does mention being well trained though in the second
well-trained
amendment.
militia,
Militia,
um,
right?
well-trained militia.
So
But
that still mentions training though.
yeah, it does. It because it's important, and it's good that they were able to recognize that the training was important. Well,
But I'm
because
just saying, there's people
arguably
that
the training for them from the French probably was what won them the war in the end.
right,
Also the
right,
support, but I mean a lot of the because again this goes back to like if you're sending people overseas. I think I lost my camera.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's dead.
We can just wrap then. I mean,
That's fine. Well, let's
no big
we got a
deal.
couple other things. Let's just kind of we'll finish up on,
Yeah.
um, but it goes back to like sending people overseas and they're not trained. You know that engagement is not going to be. You're going to lose your engagements. Yeah, every engagement that you have. The same
Oh
thing would
yeah.
have been the
I
case
mean,
with them, and
that's
that's why the well-trained militia was so important. Was because if it wasn't for well-trained militia, they probably would have lost a significant larger quantity of their engagements with the British.
we spent 3 out of the 10 weeks in basic training working on marksmanship and firearm safety and training. So for you to tell me that you don't think training is a necessity for firearms ownership, I that's just ridiculous to me. I think that's insane. And like you just said, you don't feel comfortable conceal carrying without some pistol training. So
Because
I'm not saying
I
it
feel
has
like
to.
I need to, because I feel like I need to, do better.
Well,
I can't hit a target consistently enough with the current
yeah,
weapon I have. Why would I want to take that into the real world? And this goes back to all I can think of is like I'm in a crowded situation and I'm being charged, and I know what's behind my target, and I know that there's a possibility I could hit the things behind my target. Why would I want to? Why would I put myself in that situation? Because then I'm just
right,
endangering more lives in that case.
exactly. Yeah.
So
So that's really all I had to say about that. Um, yeah, I think we covered some good stuff.
I'll bring it back to the uh, FPC, uh, the firearms policy. We'll go back to that. Look at all that
Hmm.
stuff. Look at all the good stuff they have. They got a lot of options for taking action. You can filter by jurisdiction, which I thought was really cool. So you can go
Hmm.
by state or you can go by federal. And again, it walks you through like a lot of the stuff that they're currently working on and how you can help and be effective. And I brought up the SRA website in this case too, because they're all about firearms training. It's like two big things was firearms training and community development and slash helping out people when in need. And they actively post on their Twitter. You can like look up a bunch of this SRA little sub communities out there in the United States. A lot of donations going out to like affected hurricane victims, tornado victims, wildfire victims. Um,
Hmm.
they're all about gun safety and gun training. They actually have a whole segment on their website called Education, and there's downloadable information about shotguns for rookies, basics for the uninitiated, SRA Rifler program, introduction to chemicals exposure, rifles for rookies, introduction to reloading. I mean, there's just like, and then on top of that, there's a ton of information in the community, a lot of very knowledgeable people. So go ahead and join them. And Greg brought this up to me, the National African American Gun Association. If you're an African American, you may or may not know the history of California. Reagan, when he was a governor,
The
enacted
Mulford Act.
the policy to restrict firearm ownership and targeted the black community without actually, making it racist. They just worked around so they didn't have to mention, stop the sales to black people. They just did it a different way. Black people tend to own this type of firearm. Well, we're going to ban or restrict that firearm. And that's what they did. And then all of a sudden, all the black people who were able to legally own their firearms, all of a sudden couldn't own, or it was very restricted on how they could get access to it.
I love how, right-wing conservatives love to forget about the Mulford Act.
Oh yeah, like I'm pretty sure, like I know Democrats make this a talking point for them, but they don't really act on it. Like Obama, everyone was scared when Obama came to power in the presidency, because they're scared they're going to lose the AR-15 or something like that. He was like the most pro-2A president of the 21st century.
I know. He was the one that made it legal to open carry in national parks.
So it's like, I don't know, maybe people got to reevaluate their political leanings. Trump has done more. You would think
people would want to do that.
Trump has done more to hurt the 2A community than recent presidents. And this goes, it's like nothing new. Most policy restrictions when it comes to guns, we know this. It affects lower income communities and also different racial communities, like racial minority communities. And this is another reason why you should probably join National African American Gun Association, because it's in the name. Or the SRA, the SRA's got a large.
Those are our recommended groups for left-leaning.
We're not officially associated. We're not officially extended arms of them. We just recommend them because they're going to be good communities. They're good places to learn and get information from and develop skills. So.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's all I got.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us for the Sunshine Reformer podcast, broadcasting right here from Central Florida. My name is Greg.
And I'm Gabriel.
And we'll see you at the next episode.